As we wait, hope that everyone's having a great time. It's right a few days before Q4. Anyone who's in commerce or who's been at it at least for 1 or 2 years is going to know how important Q4 is going to be, both in terms of obviously the marketing side and any kind of holiday sales you plan to do, but as you also see, as well as the supply chain side, because no matter how well you can market things, you have to make sure that your supply chain is in order as well in order to fulfill these orders to your customers, and which is particularly important for something like the holiday season, right? Especially if you're in a Western country or probably most countries where Christmas is a big deal, and having things arrive on time for Christmas, especially if you promise it in a holidays campaign, is going to be really critical. So, today we're really going to be talking about just Q4 in general, but more specifically how you can and should be thinking about leveraging direct from China shipping for your holiday season. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and start it. I think as you join, just comment below. And if you have any questions about this topic, just comment in the comments as well, and I'll make sure to address. And even after this live webinar ends, feel free just to comment below, and I'll try to respond in the comments afterwards as well. All right. So first, before I really kind of get started on this topic, let me just zoom in a little bit. All right. So this is going to be a little bit more of an advanced topic. This is really talking about like how you should think about leveraging direct from China shipping for this Q4 specifically. And this might be targeted to some of the more advanced folks here. However, we do have a lot of content for folks who might be just drop shipping, for example, or not exactly quite here yet. So I want to make sure that you folks get that information as well. So we do actually have a couple of modules in our completely free EcommOps course. There's one that we have on Q4 China supply chain planning, which is probably a little bit more catered towards those who are drop shipping or moving on from drop shipping and just planning your supply chain in general, including your inventory, etc. And then there's also another one that's going to be a little bit more of an advanced topic as well. So both of these are in our free course. If you don't have it already, just comment course below and Camilla is going to be able to send it to you. And if you are seeing this on YouTube, we'll link to the course in our description as well. So just check it out. We have plenty of content around just how do you plan your supply chain in general. And this webinar today is specifically going to more talk about how do you leverage China shipping specifically for this Q4. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Feel free to comment in the notes below if there's any questions, and we'll make sure to address them. All right, so we're gonna talk about Q4. Why is Q4 uniquely challenging in 2022? And it is actually uniquely challenging, more challenging than usual. We're going to talk about how direct from China shipping and fulfillment can actually address these challenges, and how to actually effectively utilize direct from China shipping and fulfillment in this Q4 of 2022 if you decide to do so. So we're started with, okay, why is Q4 uniquely challenging this year? Now, back up a little bit, Q4 is always somewhat challenging. It is obviously one of the most important parts, one of the most important periods in the year for e-commerce and retail in general, because such a high amount of sales volume tends to concentrate on Q4. And for really a lot of industries and brands, Q4 might take a big portion or sometimes majority of their sales throughout the year. Now, 2022 is really particularly challenging because let's back up into last year, 2021. It was an amazing year for e-commerce and just retail in general, but particularly direct-to-consumer e-commerce online shopping. All right, I mean, everyone here probably knows or remembers that there was that period of COVID and stay at home, and everyone was shopping online, right? And a lot of customers who never shopped online in the first place started shopping online as well. And it was really going wild across every single product category, across every single platform, Amazon, single Shopify stores, custom web brands, etc. Like it was all going crazy everywhere. And higher demand for products, higher demand for online shopping equaled more need for physical inventory, a lot more need for it. Now, physical inventory doesn't scale very easily, especially in the traditional model. We'll talk about that. Now, 2021, last year, was also the worst in terms of supply chain disruptions. Now, anyone who was shipping bulk freight to the US or the EU probably experienced this before, but it was really kind of caused by a combination of one, COVID restrictions for freight coming out of China. There was massively reduced capacities in ports in LA, et cetera, and other steps in the value chain. So trucks, for example, partly because of COVID restrictions locally, and also there was just too much volume coming in because there were these spikes in demand in terms of products trying to get to the US, trying to the EU, and really outpacing the capacity that was actually available in the logistics supply chain. So what's led to freight costs were ridiculous. Sea freight costs were increasing to 10, 20x their lowest average prices, and containers were taking 2 to 3 months to arrive to their final destination, right? Whereas in the normal times, like especially before COVID, if you get on a fast boat from China into LA, for example, that might just take 2 weeks, 2, 3 weeks, but it was taking 2, 3 months. So it's a huge difference. And what happened was that despite there was so much demand, especially for online shopping, a lot of products were out of stock throughout the year. And that's what made Q4 of 2021 really kind of a disaster, right? Many retailers, many e-commerce brands had delayed shipments. I mean, if they were shipping their products in bulk to the US or the EU, and they completely missed the Q4 slash the entire winter slash the entire holiday season. And obviously, for anyone kind of in the business, that if you miss this season, that's a complete disaster on your business. And now going to this year, all right. So the impact on this year is all of this cascaded into this year. What happened was that a lot of retailers had a lot of excess stock caused by delays in the previous year, caused by delays in 2021. And I mean, large retailers such as Walmart, for example, and I have this article here for you. You guys can check out the notes later as well, where Walmart, Target, they really struggled in the first half of this year because they had too much inventory. There was too much inventory that they had that missed the deadlines for holiday season for last year, and they just had way too much stock. And stock is cash tied up. Stock is also warehousing fees. There are actually ongoing costs that are going to be a big hit on your business. And what made it worse, outside of just the supply side issues, was that consumer demand was really cooling. I mean, those of you who follow the financial markets at all, you guys know what's happening with the stock markets, in the past year or so. This is not good, right? So just generally speaking, the stock markets have taken a hit. The economy has globally has really kind of taken a hit. And not only that, there are a lot of concerns around how it looks going forward, the future economic outlook, and uncertainty is a huge issue, especially if it's uncertainty in the future. And that has a huge impact on the ability to effectively plan for inventory. And that's why inventory planning for Q4 this year has, I say nearly impossible, but what I really probably mean is impossible. So one truth, generally speaking, about inventory planning in general is that you can never be accurate. I've never seen a completely accurate inventory plan. I mean, it's just not a reality, especially when your lead times are long. And this made it even more difficult because you're talking about physical retailers and kind of larger e-commerce brands, who might be planning for their inventory in local US, EU 3PLs, and this might be you, is you had to plan 4 to 6 months out. Because you have this freight lead time of 2 to 3 months, and you have some production lead times of a couple of months exactly. So you were planning 4 to 6 months, which means that if you're using the traditional freight and local 3PL model, by this time it's already too late. I mean, right now it's exactly the end of September. It's not even Q4 yet. But if you're actually wanting to kind of plan your inventory for Q4 sales fulfilled locally, it's already too late because you should have planned already a couple months ago. All right. And especially at that time, no one really knew what to base the forecast on. 2021 was over. 2021 was a huge boom in e-commerce. We talked about that already. Massive demand, but you can't base your forecast on 2021. Everyone knew it was over. The economy was softening, and it would have just been a bad idea to plan your year's inventory based on the past year's sales of one of the historical years or the historical year e-commerce in general. And no one knew what 2022 would bring in terms of the economy, especially a few months ago when if you're a larger brand, you had to already plan for the inventory already. And a lot of brands are still licking their wounds from dealing with the pains of missed deliveries or excess stock from last Q4. So a lot of retailers, a lot of larger e-commerce brands have been really forced to be a lot more conservative in inventory planning for Q4. And sometimes like really significantly so, right? They don't want to face the same kind of excess stock as a lot of them currently are. They don't want to have too much cash tied in stock when they don't really know what the consumer demand is going to be. But this kind of causes a different problem. All right. So there's the cost of getting stock tied up in inventory. There's the cost of holding inventory in warehouses, but there's also the opportunity cost of selling out. What if you have a conservative or you had a conservative plan and you simply just didn't have enough? And this Q4 ended up being better than expected. And you can't actually meet that demand, which means that you have SKUs, products, maybe your entire brand that has to be marked as sold out over, let's say, Black Friday, right? That can just be just as costly, sometimes even more costly than if you have too much stock, because it's literally a sale that someone wants to actually, they want to purchase from your brand, but they can't because you don't have the stock available to actually fulfill that order. And that's what a lot of larger retailers have been actually facing. Now let's move on to, okay, so direct from China shipping. And if you guys don't know, this is what we at EcommOps do. And we've actually seen recently that a lot of direct-to-consumer brands, larger retailers have been moving a portion and sometimes all of their fulfillment to directly shipping from China. And by the way, how do we know this? We know this because they're coming to us. They're coming to us, and or you guys are coming to us and you guys want to solve your problem of these ridiculous supply chain issues and just not being able to plan accordingly for local fulfillment. So the benefits for those, and by the way, if you're already shipping from China, kudos to you. You actually have probably a leg up on your competition because you're going to be able to have additional flexibility, have the additional stock to actually ship to your customers, and potentially outcompete your competitors who don't actually have this option. But let's just kind of talk about, some of the benefits of shipping from China and why they directly address some of these recent supply chain issues. By the way, I see this hurricane indicator here. For those of you who don't know, I'm based in Miami right now, so there's a hurricane coming. But anyways, we're all good though. Don't worry about me. All right, so really the biggest benefit of being able to directly fulfill from China is the significantly shorter lead times. Any factory, assuming that they're based in China, can send to a China fulfillment center like ours in 1 to 4 days. Like on average, it's probably 2 to 3 days. And if your factory is based around the Shenzhen area, it could be hours, right? Versus if you're using traditional freight methods, it's going to be months on sea or at least weeks on air. So this is a huge difference. I mean, this is a massive difference in just how long it takes for your inventory to arrive. And that really kind of changes your ability to flexibly plan for things. So your inventory is ready to go for fulfillment, within days of production ready, right? It really just completely shortens your planning cycles. And, really in uncertain demand periods like Q4, or for example, when you're launching a new product, or just any kind of sales season you might expect, or just randomness, like you have random demand spikes sometimes. This provides you the ability to plan for your replenishment, like just much later than normally you would have to do actually planning for your inventory, like to be shipped to the US, the EU, for example. Actually, many of our clients are actually under planning, or they were under planning their inventory for the season uh, for local fulfillment specifically. I mean, they have been under planning their inventory for local fulfillment. It's probably on the boat already on the way, but they have a backup plan to replenish to our China warehouse if the local stock runs out, right? And this is a great strategy. This is going to allow them to really address the potential possibility that the demand is going to go up and they're not going to have enough stock and therefore deal with that or remove that risk of the opportunity cost of marking things as sold out. And generally speaking, shipping times are good enough. Look, I'm not going to pretend to you that there's going to be some magic and you get 2-day Amazon Prime shipping. That's not what it is, but it can be as fast as 5 to 8 calendar days. All right. Or, 1 to 2 weeks, for some cheaper options. It's not 2-day shipping, but it's way better than running out of stock, during the Q4 season. So it's certainly good enough to support as a Q4 backup plan. And yes, this part is actually important as well. A lot of brands these days, if they don't really kind of consider direct from China shipping or some option, they really are just priced out of international markets. Shipping to any international market from, say, a US fulfillment center is going to be prohibitively expensive and is going to take incredibly long shipping times. So, being able to actually open up the new markets, it's immediately going to be additional revenue boost, especially in a time when brands need it, especially during like a holiday season, like Q4. And in terms of like the costs, like it's going to depend a little bit on the exact product in the exact way, but I'll just tell you, like end-to-end costs are going to be comparable, to if you're utilizing a local US or EU 3PL for most weight ranges. Now, one thing that you want to be aware of is that like you can't just compare direct from China shipping fees to your customers with your US 3PL, like your ShipBob, whatever fulfillment costs, because you have to actually add in the inbound freight, you have to add any customs, any fees, etc., to that calculation. If you add it all up, it's going to be very comparable to utilizing a local 3PL when you ship from China. Now, I will say that it's probably a little bit more expensive than sea freight plus local fulfillment if you have heavier products. However, it's usually cheaper end to end if you're comparing versus air freight and local fulfillment for most most consumer products. And the overall average cost can and probably will be actually cheaper when you account for the shorter lead times, because that means reduce holding costs, reduce cash tied in inventory. That's obviously going to help drive your business even more if you have more cash flow, more available cash flow. And generally speaking, this could be much more reliable customs clearance as well, which is going to be very, very important for international orders, which, having your orders get customs holds doing Q4 shipping right before Christmas, that's going to kind of create a lot of issues. And even if it's not your fault, there's going to be a lot of unhappiness from your customers. But yes, if you're already directly shipping from China, then great job. You potentially have a big significant advantage over your competitors this Q4 because look, there's still a lot of retailers who just don't really kind of see China shipping as an option. And they've been under preparing, and there's actually a pretty decent chance that they're going to have to mark items as sold out that you can actually outcompete if you're able to continue to sell and fulfill from China. All right, so before we move on, just wanted to remind everyone that if you have any questions about this, please comment below. And and by the way, if you're watching this now or later, if you want these notes as well, just comment notes below as well, so that Camilla can send these to you. All right, so now how do we actually utilize direct from China in Q4 if you're not using it already? Or actually, if you're using it already, you should still plan for it as soon as possible, which is right now. Again, this is when I'm filming this, it's going to be before Q4 officially starts. Probably putting on YouTube like in a few days, but this is something that you should be planning now, or you should already have been planning for. So first, in terms of like how you want to think about your own strategy planning, you should really kind of think about like planning for the so-called worst or best case scenario. All right. I mean, it depends how you look at it, right? Um, what if your demand spikes and you run out of stock, right? Before Black Friday or before holiday sales, right? What if your marketing crushes it, but you just don't have enough stock to push it, right? So it kind of depends on how you see this. If this is the worst or best case scenario, this is the best case scenario, maybe in terms of demand, but worst case scenario in terms of your supply chain, right? This is really key to remember. Like opportunity cost of selling out when your demand is there can be more significant impact versus overstocking, especially during a period like Q4 when a lot of brands are going to expect and experience their, some of their highest amount of sales throughout the year. So just to start planning for this, and as soon as possible, probably now, communicate with your factories on their available capacity and their ability to produce as small quantities as possible with as quick of turnaround as possible. I mean, this is really, really important, right? Both of these, right? In order to get as flexible as possible, you don't want to be planning for 4 containers that normally is your like 6 months worth of stock, right? You want to be as flexible as possible. Like if it takes 2 days to our warehouse, you don't need to plan for 6 months worth of stock, right? Let's say your typical order is 50,000 units and like it takes 2 months of production lead time normally, right? If you just need 5,000 units at a time, again, talk to your factory about this, right? They may not need 2 months. They might need way less than 2 months, right? Um, Now you got to talk to them about this and tell them that, oh, it's because like you're using China fulfillment, because they might be simply used to you ordering huge batches at a time, and therefore initially planning for it, initially responding like that um, when they are kind of quoting you on the production lead times. But again, it depends on the factory, right? And some factories, and I'd say like a lot of factories, they might even welcome the smaller batches, right? During a period where you normally don't put in POs anyways, right? Especially if you're a bigger brand, especially if you're more used to planning for large POs, purchase orders, by the way, large POs going into US fulfillment warehouses 6 months in advance. This is something that you're not going to, like, you normally don't even order at this period. You normally don't order in October or November. So depending on the factory, depending on their client, depending on their client base, demanding on their normal capacity, they might actually enjoy the smaller batch orders during a period where you or their normal big clients do not put in orders anyways, right? But talk to your factory about it, right? Now, in order to try to get this as as kind of efficient as possible, if your factory like is still telling you that there is a longer production lead time, it's not that flexible, one good strategy to consider is maybe just having your factory initiate some materials procurement or procurement of certain components that might take a longer lead time, so that they can kind of prepare for those materials and components in order to shorten the actual lead time of the actual production batches, right? And obviously, you want to talk to your factory. Who puts the risk on that? Is that, I mean, who has the risk on that? Is that they take the risk in the initial procurement, or potentially you might have to pay something upfront to actually procure the actual materials, but compared to the actual production run is probably going to be much lower. And if it's a product that you have a high level of confidence in, those materials are going to very much carry over to be useful during the normal selling seasons anyways. All right, so the other thing that you want to do, and this is really important, is that you really want to understand your costs. You want to analyze all of your end-to-end fulfillment costs, the expectations, and versus your available margin, right? Like this is like for compare your local fulfillment, current fulfillment versus like if you're using China fulfillment. So if you are shipping large quantities like container fulls to the US anyways, you probably will be a little bit cheaper kind of using your US fulfillment center. But China shipping is probably going to be a little bit more expensive. Again, depends on the product. But if your demand is high and you have enough margin, then it still could be a no-brainer, right? Because again, opportunity cost is a cost in itself. And if you have enough margin to support direct from China shipping in order to extend your selling season more, if you're out of stock, then it's something that you seriously want to consider. You want to estimate costs from your China fulfillment partner carefully, especially if you're planning bundles or planning sales, right? I mean, this is something that, really just talk to your China fulfillment partner, get an idea of what the costs are going to be. And one thing that unfortunately keep in mind that shipping costs do tend to increase through peak Q4 between roughly Black Friday to Christmas time. All right. Unfortunately, there is no way for us to exactly know exactly what the cost increases are going to be. It depends on supply and demand. So unfortunately, this is not something that we can talk about right now. But as it closer to, we'll definitely have updates in this group in terms of where the cost might be trending, so you have as good of an idea as possible. And then the other thing that you want to consider is that when it gets closer to Christmas time, when Christmas delivery is going to be more critical, you may opt for a faster express shipping line so that it's going to be a little bit more expensive. But you just have to really analyze your margins, analyze to see if it makes sense to have a slightly more expensive, more consistent, faster shipping line so that you can maybe squeeze an extra couple days or extra week of sales where you can actually have expectations for Christmas delivery, which is going to be probably some of your most effective sales. If possible, like now going into like what your plans for Q4 is, narrow your SKU selection to what really matters the most for you, at least in terms of what you plan to push through China shipping. What you plan to make sure that it's not sold out. Like even if it's possible, like there may not be that much of a point for like some like SKUs that even if they're sold out, they're not really that profitable anyways. Like it might not be a point. I mean, obviously you should consider like the actual direct unit margins for each product, but you also should consider the, kind of like bundles, upsells, cross sells, etc. Like, do your work and kind of figure out like what SKUs are actually important to make sure that you maintain inventory, whether it's in the US or in China. And you really just focus on top performing SKUs that have plenty of margin to make like that direct from China shipping a lot more sensible and make inventory planning a lot more sensible. Now, if you are going to use China shipping, I mean, definitely like use a trusted fulfillment partner. All right. There are so many shipping line options from China. Most of them are not good. Okay. Like don't just use any shipping option. You do not want to just use the cheapest and very much like less reliable options. Some good examples. So some good examples of good couriers are UniExpress, 4PX, UBI, and a handful of others as well. Now, the one key to also pay attention to though is that each of these companies, they do have a range of different shipping lines. Like UniExpress has something like 15 or something, like technically speaking. So just the brand is not enough. You really got to work with a trusted fulfillment partner who can actually advise you on the best options. And it's going to depend on your product. It's going to depend on your shipping expectations as well, right? One thing is that, whether you work with us or someone else, make sure that, especially for this year, make sure that your fulfillment center is based in Shenzhen. Okay. Let me actually just show you a map. So make sure that, so I'm based in Miami right now and zoom out. So make sure that your fulfillment center is based in Shenzhen, or the Shenzhen area is totally fine. So this is Shenzhen right here, is in the south of China. Now, the reason why this is important is because it's in very close proximity to Hong Kong, which actually the most efficient shipping lines for a lot of purposes, they actually fly out of Hong Kong. Because there's just a lot more flexibility in terms of like what you can ship out of there, and generally speaking, the flight situation worldwide is a lot more consistent going from Hong Kong. And the reason why I also say like specifically like for 2022, and honestly probably for as long as COVID restrictions continue to be an issue in China, which I think is going to be a while still, is that Shenzhen has really been the least hit in terms of COVID restrictions. A big part is because, like, quite honestly, like the area around Shenzhen, like its manufacturing areas, this is one of the last major vestiges of what's actually working in the Chinese economy. So they're doing everything possible to try to minimize COVID impacts and COVID restrictions, both in terms of just making sure that they prevent COVID outbreaks. And the government has a lot of leeway typically in terms of having less stringent restrictions in Shenzhen. Like there'll be like a 1 weekend lockdown as opposed to like a 2 week lockdown, right? Which tends to happen a lot in, some of the other, like for example, the Shanghai area is typically another very popular area for both drop shipping and also just shipping from China. But unfortunately, and you guys can look it up, just through COVID, this area has been really hard hit by a lot more restrictions. I don't exactly know why, but definitely if you want to de-risk against some of the COVID restrictions, which are obviously hugely impactful on supply chain and COVID in general, you want to be fulfilling from Shenzhen. And then one other thing is that this is kind of a little bit more of a technical thing, but you want to make sure that your ERP system, backend processes, fulfillment platform is able to actually support China fulfillment and working with them effectively, as well as your local fulfillment system, right? I think this is something that you want to make sure that your China fulfillment partner has some processes to make sure that they can actually identify, like if you're using a mixed model, if you're using some local fulfillment as well, you want to make sure that there is some process technology to identify what SKUs, what orders should be actually shipped from China, and how do you potentially swap back and forth as you want to be more flexible with the process. All right, so this is kind of like the overall guide. Let me actually see. So if you do have any questions, just comment below, but otherwise I think that we can more or less wrap up here. So yeah, if you want these notes, just comment notes below in the comments, and Camilla is going to be able to send that to you. We'll also put this on YouTube as well. And the other thing is that throughout the rest of this Q4, please look out for additional content from us, whether it's in this group, maybe it's in a YouTube channel, around just more specifics of how you might want to think about certain items through Q4. We're going to talk about some potential updates in the supply chain, updates in any kind of delays, updates in any kind of price changes or price increase, kind of throughout the period. All right, so thank you everyone. If you guys have any more questions, make sure to comment below as well, and also try to comment to respond to the comments. And again, you look out in the next couple of weeks, there will be additional content coming out in terms of more specifics of planning. Oh, and by the way, if you guys didn't see the start, if you guys are looking for a little bit more content, maybe a little bit less advanced in this, if you're drop shipping, if you want to learn about just supply chain planning in general in Q4, make sure to check out our course. If you comment course below in the comments, we'll make sure that Camilla sends that to you as well. All right, everyone. Well, thank you guys so much. Again, this is Dayu from EcommOps. See you guys next time.